this information. Okay. When we describe the author, we want to describe them in terms of what is important for us to know about them so that we understand more about their work. Not everything. We don't even need to know where they're from unless it helps us somehow. For example, the author Roald Dahl, he's the author of James and the Giant Peach, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Witches. And it is important, first of all, to know where he's from, because in his poetry, he has a different accent, a different dialect than we do. And so in some cases, for me, it doesn't rhyme, but in his dialect, it would rhyme because he would pronounce it differently. So knowing that he was from the UK is important. Okay. Well, not the UK. Yeah, the UK. I think specifically he was from Wales. Okay. He was Welsh, which Wales is part of the UK. So knowing that he would have had a Welsh accent would have been significant for understanding his poetry. But also, it's important to know Roald Dahl's parents were Norwegian. And in Norway, they have a very strong tradition of fantasy and folklore, especially in trolls and elves and little people and big people. Okay. And so when we look at the way he works with fantasy, with the witches, and we see that embedded in probably the stories his mother would tell him when he was young, stories and folklore from Norway about these fantastic creatures. He wrote a book called The BFG, The Big Friendly Giant. And it was made into a movie not too long ago. I haven't seen the movie. But basically, it talks about this big friendly giant and his idea, or maybe not belief in giants, but his ideas for his writings would have come from this Norwegian tradition of folklore in fantastic and mythical creatures. Okay, so that's why it might be important to know where he's from, because it affects the way he would have written his poetry and in the subjects that he would write about. Now, if we look at Edgar Allan Poe, it's not important where he's from because it doesn't affect anything. It doesn't affect his accent, doesn't affect his dialect, it doesn't affect how how his poetry rhymes. In Edgar Allan Poe's time, what's more important than where he is from is when he is from. Because during the time he was living and writing, tuberculosis outbreaks were awful, and women women loved the way tuberculosis made you look. They would actually do their makeup and lose weight and try and make themselves sick, look sick from tuberculosis because it was called the beautiful death. The, the style or the ideas of beauty at that period of time were about how you looked when you had this disease, this illness, which at that time basically killed you. Okay. And a lot of the terror and the dark things that he wrote are from dark places. His young wife was killed very soon after they married, and if I'm not mistaken, from tuberculosis. So the idea that they had this disease that was rampaging and killing people, including many of those that he loved from his family, probably worked with his mind. And a lot of the poetry that we have from Edgar Allan Poe is because of that. The Raven is for his lost Lenore, and Annabel Lee describes this love that he has lost. And so, without what was happening during that period of time, we wouldn't have the same poetry from Edgar Allan Poe. So, in that case, it's not important where he was from, it's when he was from, because that's what was affecting his poetry, affecting the way he wrote. Okay. So we're going to get into some of these ideas. What do you think is important about Emily Dickinson?
The way in which she wrote,
Uh-huh.
the use of punctuation, and mm, well, it was like unusual.
Okay. All right. Now, what do we need to know before we start? This is, yes, this is the one thing that her poetry has. It is very unconventional according to the time period that it was written in. And actually, her poems were changed after she died and her poetry was published. Before it was published, it was changed because it was too unconventional for the publishers. It was too unconventional for the readers. Now, that's what we respect and admire about Emily Dickinson is the fact that it was so unconventional during that period of time, right? The first thing we need to know, first of all, she's a woman. She's a woman who was writing poetry in the 1800s at a period of time where women didn't do that. All right? Many women would not have even had the opportunity to be educated. However, she was educated through private schools, and this was something that she brought on as her work. Women didn't do that. Maybe a woman worked, but not in something that was so subjective like writing and poetry. Very few women were doing that. And we see an example from uh, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Beecher Stowe, Harriet Beecher Stowe, right? She was a woman writing. Now, Uncle Tom's Cabin started out as a series of short stories about the same community in the newspaper. But right after it was completed there, it was put together into book form. So a woman writing for a newspaper, okay. But a woman writing a book at that period of time, it was highly unusual. So, first of all, the fact that she was a woman, right? It was unusual that she was writing poetry during this period of time. What else? Is there anything else that we should know about her?
Um, at the time when she wrote the poem, um, some relatives or people who were closer to her had passed away.
Again,
Um, at the time when she wrote the poem, many relatives or friends had passed away.
okay. So, do you think that she was like surrounded by death? We could say.
Mm, maybe I read uh, this this idea in internet.
Uh huh. This isn't one of the things that normally stands out, the fact that she lost many people. But the one thing, she was obsessed with death. She was obsessed with death. Okay. And so you can see that as a common theme in her poetry, that she was really obsessed on that and the idea that she knew she was going to die someday, but it wasn't like death was this horrible thing that was going to happen to her. I would even imagine Emily Dickinson taking on like a Mexican point of view about death. Okay. In other words, not thinking, oh, I'm going to die. This is a terrible thing. But like thinking, yeah, death, it comes to us all. And someday I'm going to go and someday this is going to happen. And let's see what goes on then. So she had a very strange way of thinking of it. And this is what we're going to see in the poem from today. Yeah, but she was obsessed with death, this idea that she was going to die. Now, does anybody know why she would be obsessed with death like this?
Because people was not talking about it.
Because people didn't talk about death? A little more than that. All right. Emily herself was not well. All right. I don't remember. I'm trying to find it here. What it was, but she was not well. First of all, it was believed that she was a bit of an agoraphobe, meaning that she didn't like to be around people. She had this thing about going out to places in public and she didn't like it. Right? And first, second of all, she would always dress in white. And anything you know about this period of time, grown women didn't wear white. Children wore white, right? Small children wore white. A grown woman didn't wear white. So this grown woman walking around completely in white, she probably didn't look very good because she was sick. She must have been quite a sight to just watch her walk down the street. She probably looked like death herself. Okay, just in white now. So we have this idea that, first of all, she was sick, and that's probably why she obsessed so much about death, right? And she was very much an eccentric at the time, meaning that she would do things. She wouldn't go out in public. She wouldn't go to events. She would dress in white. And when she would go out, the people would be looking at her very strangely. Okay? So she was very unusual to begin with. So that kind of shows us here that her idea of poetry and how she was writing would have also been very unusual. Right? She eventually had a stroke and died. Now, she was an American poet, so we don't have to worry so much about the accent or the dialect, although that's something that we need to know about her. She's an American poet. She's actually considered one of the greatest American poets, despite and also because of this strange way that she had of writing. Okay. If we look at, now that's really what we need to know about her. Oh, we need to know that, first of all, very few of her poems were published when she was alive. After she died, her sister had the poems. Now, Emily asked her sister to burn the poems after she had died, but her sister didn't burn them. She took them and had them published. However, the publisher was not ready to publish poetry that was as unconventional as hers was. So they fixed it up, they fixed the punctuation, they fixed the way it was written, and they published it, but now very quite different from the way she did. One of the things that we have to know is that none of the poems had a title. None of them had a title to them. And so what the publisher did was take the first line of the poem and put that as the title. And for our poem today, it's not bad because the poem is called Because I Could Not Stop for Death. That sounds normal. That sounds understandable. We also have another poem called I Made Slow Riches But My Gain. I made slow riches but my gain? It doesn't make sense because we have enjambment between the first line and the second line, which means it says, I made slow riches, but my gain was steady as the sun. The sentence continues in the second line. And so when you cut it right there and make that the title, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? So none of the poems had titles. The first line of the poem was taken as the title of the poem and were published after her death. Now, in her life, she had many relationships. She didn't like to go out and see people but she would hold a lot of relationships in writing through letters. And she was very good at making friendships and getting to know people who would help her to further her writing and her poetry. Okay. Yeah, so we do have different versions of the poem of Dickinson. It's important to see that you will find different versions around here. So that's what we need to know really about the poet herself. Now, what about the poem? What is it about the poem? What do we need to know about the poem? A quick summary of the poem that we're looking at today. Because I could not stop for death.
That she sees the death as a friend.
Very much so, right? She sees death as a friend, and not just a friend, but almost like a male suitor, like a gentleman suitor, a gentleman who is coming to take her on a date or out to dinner. It's very exciting, isn't it? The way that she presents it. So, not just a friend, but a male friend. All right. And that's, I like I said, the way I think that she would fit into Mexican culture very well, because she sees them not as someone to fight, not as someone to be against, but someone to go with gladly, right? And enjoy the drive there. So exactly in the poem, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, we see Emily Dickinson's ideas about death. And here she's treating death not just as a friend, but as a gentleman suitor, someone who has come to pick her up and take her out and possibly someday marry her. And that will be her life from now on. I think it's a neat way to see it. So that's our summary of the poem. In the final project that I'm asking you for, what I'm going to ask you for is an analysis of a poem. And what we did with Emily Dickinson right there are the first two parts of it. Well, the first part, the introduction. Okay. The introduction is first of all going to talk about the poet, but you're going to give the information that is necessary for us to know in order to understand the poem and how they write. Not everything. Don't give me Wikipedia. Just one paragraph with the most important information. Maybe the time period they were writing in, where they're from, how they wrote, what kind of influences they had when they were writing. If how they died is important, that's fine. Okay. But more than anything there, we're going to find what influences they may have had in writing the poem. And then your next paragraph in your introduction will be a summary of the poem, what it's trying to say, what it means. And the last sentence of the introduction of the second paragraph will lead the readers into the analysis. Right? All these elements will come up in the analysis of the poem. That's the last line. And that guides us into the analysis. Okay? So your introduction is going to be two short paragraphs. One of them is about the author and what we need to know about them. And the other one is a summary of the poem, of what it means, right? What it meant to you, what you got from it. Now, the next section, you're only going to use the section that your poem has. So you may not have all the sections that I mentioned here. The next section is going to be either rhyme scheme, which would be meter, or rhyme. Oh no, sorry, rhyme scheme or meter. Okay, let's look first of all here at meter. Sorry about that if I made a noise there. I told y'all I'm having trouble today. You really have no idea. All right, let's look at, what did I say? Meter, right? Let's look at meter.
Correct.
Let me share this with you so that you can see what I'm doing. And this is what I'm doing today is what I'm going to expect you to do to your poem also in your report, because one of the things that you will have is the poem itself with all of these elements marked on it, like we're doing. All right. So we have, because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too, for his civility. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun, or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed the swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then 'tis centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. Okay. Let's look at our meter. Where do you hear the emphasis here? Because I could not stop for death. Because I could not stop for death. Where are you hearing the stress? Where are you hearing the emphasis? On which words, on which parts of words? I'm going to mark these in red. Okay. What we should hear, I'm going to go a little fast so we can cover more items here. Please let me know if you have any questions. What we hear here is because, well, I don't want to mark that. Sorry. I don't want to mark that so much. There we go. Okay. Because I could not stop for death. Because I could not stop for death. Because I could not stop for death. Right? What is that?
Iambic.
Iambic. Very good. Okay.
Tetrameter.
How many?
4.
Tetrameter, right? We've got 4 of them there. Exactly. So here I'm going to write iambic tetrameter. I can't write very well using paint, but there I would write iambic tetrameter. Okay. And the next one, he kindly stopped for me. What do we have?
Iambic.
Iambic
Trimeter.
trimeter. Exactly. So he would write iambic trimeter. The carriage held but just ourselves. What do we have?
Iambic
Iambic
tetrameter.
tetrameter.
Tetrameter again. And immortality.
That is
Iambic.
Iambic trimeter.
Oh,
And immortality. We slowly drove. He knew no haste. What do we have?
Iambic tetrameter.
Exactly. And I had put away.
iambic trimeter.
Iambic trimeter, exactly. My labor and my leisure too.
Iambic tetrameter.
Iambic tetrameter, exactly. For his civility.
Iambic trimeter.
Trimeter, okay. We passed the school where children strove.
Iambic tetrameter.
Tetrameter, okay. By the way, remember the one that I put in Blackboard may be a little different from this. I always have the bad luck of grabbing 2 different versions, and my students are like, that's not the same version I have.
Yes.
And there are different versions of Emily Dickinson out there, so I probably grabbed the wrong one. Sorry about that. But you get the idea. It's the exact same thing with the other one. At recess in the ring.
Iambic
Trimeter.
trimeter.
Trimeter, exactly. Iambic trimeter. We pass the fields of gazing grain.
Iambic tetrameter.
Tetrameter.
Iambic tetrameter. We pass the setting sun.
Iambic
Iambic
trimeter.
trimeter.
Trimeter, exactly. Iambic trimeter. Or rather, he passed us.
Iambic trimeter.
Iambic trimeter, exactly. The dews drew quivering and chill.
Iambic
Iambic
tetrameter.
tetrameter.
Tetrameter, exactly. Iambic tetrameter. For only gossamer my gown.
Iambic tetrameter.
Iambic tetrameter, exactly. My tippet only tool.
Iambic trimeter.
Trimeter.
Iambic trimeter. We paused before a house that seemed
Iambic
Iambic tetrameter.
tetrameter.
iambic tetrameter. A swelling of the ground.
Iambic trimeter.
Iambic trimeter, exactly. The roof was scarcely visible.
Iambic tetrameter.
Trimeter.
Iambic tetrameter. The cornice in the ground.
Iambic trimeter.
Iambic trimeter. Since then, 'tis century. Let me hold on. Let me put that a little bit first. Since then, 'tis centuries and yet.
Iambic tetrameter.
Tetrameter.
Iambic tetrameter. Who can do this one for me? Who can tell me this one? Feels shorter than the day. Who can sound it out for me?
Me.
Uh-huh.
Feels shorter than the day.
Okay, I heard these. Feels shorter than the day. What's this one?
Iambic trimeter.
Iambic trimeter, exactly. Who can do the next one?
Me.
All
I
right.
first surmised the horses' heads.
Horses' heads, exactly. What's this one?
Iambic tetrameter.
Tetrameter, exactly. And the last one?
Me.
Uh-huh.
Where? Toward eternity.
Uh-huh. Where's our stress? Where's our stress?
Um, where?
Is it on the first syllable?
The first.
The first one?
Yes. The second.
On the second, okay. So were is not stressed. We're toward, right? Eternity, the last one, okay? So if we have 6 syllables, our stress is going to be on syllable 2, 4, and 6. Okay? We're toward eternity. Okay, good. And what's this one?
Iambic trimeter.
Trimeter, exactly. Iambic trimeter. Okay, good. So you just did the first exercise. Now you did this to the poem. In the section on meter, because your first section will be meter. Okay. In the section on meter, you will explain this meter. You will say, this poem is iambic tetrameter and trimeter. Right? We have, it's tetrameter, trimeter, tetrameter, trimeter. Look at it. It's tetrameter, trimeter, tetrameter, trimeter, tetrameter, trimeter, tetrameter, trimeter, tetra, tetra, tri. Now here we have an extra tri. Okay, and then we have 2 tetrameters together. So at first it's very regular, tetrameter, trimeter, tetrameter, trimeter, but then it changes a little bit. Why would it change? Why would it change all of a sudden? All right, after this we have again, here with we paused is tetra, tri, tetra, tri. It becomes regular again. Tetra, tri in shorter than the day, tetra, tri. So it becomes regular. There's one part in there where the meter is not completely regular. Everything is iambic tetrameter and trimeter, but there is a section where it's not tetrameter, trimeter, tetrameter, trimeter, but it changes. Why would it change? Let's look at that section. Okay, it's right. Finally stop for me. We slow. Okay, this one. This right here, this line, or rather he passed us. This is where the irregularity starts. If we look at this line, or rather he passed us, the sun. We didn't pass the sun passed us. Up until this moment, it sounds like Emily and her gentleman suitor Death are driving forward into the future. But this is the point, or rather, he passed us. This is the point where we'll see that they're going towards death. They're not just going out on a date, out for an afternoon. They're going towards death. And this is where we see it. This is why we have the change in the meter. Okay. The Jews drew quivering and chill, right? It's getting evening time. It's getting late. Only gossamer, my gown, my tippet, only tulle. A gossamer, we understand like a spider's web, a very fine cloth. The dews, the moisture on the ground at night. So we're talking about the ground, the grass. We passed before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. What's this house? What is this house? We passed before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. What is the house? Where are they going? The house that we're talking about here is the cemetery, is the tomb. It's in the grounds, right? The roof was scarcely visible. The cornice is probably the headstone on the grave. So this is the grave, the tomb that they're going towards. And that change in meter is like a change in direction. Emily and her gentleman friend are riding off in the carriage to spend an afternoon doing something. No, they're going towards the cemetery. They're going towards death. They're going towards the new house. Okay. And since then to centuries and yet feel shorter than the day, I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity, right? The horses' heads, the horses that were drawing the carriage were going towards eternity, going towards death. So we want to mention in the section where we talk about the meter, we want to mention why we have that change in meter. It was very regular, tetrameter, trimeter, tetrameter, trimeter. Why did it change like that? Because that's the point where they're not going out for a Sunday drive, they're going towards death. Okay, that's our meter. Now, in your analysis, you're also going to include a copy of the poem,
What?
the copy of the poem,
No, okay.
yeah, and it's going to start looking something like this. Now, mine's very sloppy because it's in paint, and right, nothing comes out straight in paint. But I would choose a color. Choose a color for meter, and use that color to show meter. First of all, underline the stresses, and then you're going to write what the meter is. In this case, iambic tetrameter or iambic trimeter. Okay, preferably in the same color, if not in black. But one color is going to be meter. And this is what your poem is going to start to look like. Okay, now let's take another color and use that for rhyme scheme. So I'm going to take green. Okay, whoops, green. There we go. All right, and we're going to look at rhyme scheme. Let's start. We have the word death. Because I could not stop for death. Death is our first sound. What letter are we going to give our first sound?
A.
A. Okay. So this is A. Death. That's it. First sound, A. Me is our second sound. It doesn't sound like death. It's a different sound. What letter are we going to give it?
B.
B.
Exactly. Very good. You're the first group to have answered as quickly as you guys are answering. That's really great. It's really great. Right? Ourselves, the carriage held, but just ourselves. Ourselves is not the same as me. It's not the same as death. What letter?
C.
C.
C. Exactly. All right. So C. And immortality.
B.
B. Exactly. Immortality rhymes with me. So this is going to be B. We start seeing a pattern happening here. All right. We slowly drove. He knew no haste. Haste. What does it rhyme with?
A.
Haste. Death.
No, no.
No. You say no. Now that I hear it out loud, it doesn't. Okay. Good. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. What does it rhyme with? Nothing. Nothing. Right. So it's a new sound. What letter are we going to give it?
D.
D. Exactly. Okay. And I had put away.
B.
Good job. How did you know that?
For the end of with the Y, it has a similarity.
All right. Now, technically, it doesn't rhyme. Me, immortality, away. It doesn't rhyme. It doesn't rhyme. However, this was one of the things that Emily Dickinson was known for. This is called slant rhyme or inexact rhyme. And it just means that it's supposed to rhyme, but it doesn't. Okay. Now, if you look at the pattern, because you're going to see that civility here is also B, because it rhymes very well with me and immortality. So here what we have is A, B, C, B. We have that B repetition. D, B, blank, B. Again, the B repetition. So we have the same structure in both of them. Even though it doesn't exactly rhyme, it's supposed to. All right? That's Emily Dickinson. That's the way she does things. So, two, my labor and my leisure too. What does two rhyme with? So, do we have anything so far that two rhymes with?
No.
No. What letter?
E.
E.
E. Exactly. And we know that the next one is B. So we have A, B, C, B, D, B, E, B. And you see that repeating sound of the B there. Okay. Whoops. We passed the school where children strove. Does it rhyme with anything that we have so far?
No.
No. So what letter is it?
F.
F.
F, exactly. Okay. F. At recess, in the ring. Anything
G.
with D?
No.
We have a new sound. We don't have anything that sounds like that.
I
All
said
right.
G.
Oh, you said G. I heard B. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. G. You're absolutely correct.
I'm sorry.
No, no, no. I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. We pass the fields of gazing grain. Anything that rhymes with grain up here? Grain, grain.
No.
No. What letter?
H.
H. My H is really crooked. Sorry about that, but that's H. All right. We pass the setting sun. Sun.
E. I.
I. Exactly. I. All right. Or rather, he passed us.
I too.
Mhm. Give me just a second. Excuse me a second. Ah, ok, perfecto. Sorry. All right. Us. Does it rhyme with anything?
No.
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 All right. H-I-J. All
J.
right. Chill. The dews drew quivering and chill.
No. No. K.
J-K. Okay. Gown. For only gossamer my gown.
With sun.
Okay. Um, I don't think it's meant to rhyme with sun. I like the way you're thinking because that would sound very Emily Dickinson, wouldn't it? But I don't think it's meant to rhyme with sun.
Okay.
But I like the way you think that. Let's leave that for now and look at the pattern, and then we'll come back and see if we'll put that as sun because that's a good idea. That's a good idea. This version, the funny thing is, this version of the poem, this part is very irregular and doesn't rhyme a whole lot at all. All right, but let's come back to that. Tool, my tippet only tool. Tool
With E.
with E2. No, no. Also, you're thinking good. You're thinking good. But no, that's too much of a stretch because we don't have the consonant sound. We only have the vowel sound. Okay. So now the problem is here. Let's mark this JKL. Let's mark this L, and then we'll come back and fix it because we have to continue with these. So tool is going to be M. Okay. Seemed, seemed. Okay, we don't have anything yet. Ground.
L.
With L, right, you would think swelling of the ground, but actually, no,
No.
no, no, because you're going to see in two more lines what happens. And O, okay. Now, visible,
P.
P. Look at M. What do you think? Tool, visible. All right, even though they're not written the same, but they're pronounced very similar. Let's mark
Okay.
that with M. And then ground, we have the same word here. It's not a rhyme, it's the same word, but still we're going to mark it as a rhyme. Okay. Yet, yet. What do you think?
P.
Yeah. Okay. Day,
B.
yes. Very good. All right, we're going to go back to the B. Okay. I first surmised the horse's heads. Heads.
D.
B. Did you say B?
No, D.
Oh, D. Okay. Haste. No, they really only have the same beginning sounds. Okay. So heads, no. O, P, Q. Uh-huh. O, P, Q. And eternity.
B.
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 B. Exactly. Okay. So what do we have here? A mess, you say. Right? And
The
the funny
alphabet.
thing is, yeah. And the funny thing is, it started out looking very regular in the rhyme scheme. A, B, C, B, D, B, E, B. We thought, wow, this is great. It's regular. And then, boom, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O. Oh, wait. N, O, P, B, Q, B. So it starts out very regular. All right. And then it just kind of jumbles up in there. And then it becomes very regular again. What does this tell you? Remember, we have a period in here where they're not going forward, they're going to death. They're going to the grave, they're going to the tomb. So there's a moment in the poem where things change. If you look where it stops being regular, right here is where it stops being regular. We pass the school where children strove. That's where we stop being regular. Okay? What's happening? Give me 2 seconds and I'll come back for the answer. Sorry to do this. Sorry, you still there?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say, I can't hear you.
We live.
Why do you think it starts becoming irregular at that part? Because it's here. We pass the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We pass the fields of gazing grain. We pass the setting sun, or rather, he passed us, and we saw that was the change, right? And after that, we have still irregular. The dews drew quivering and chill for only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle. That's where it starts getting a little more regular again with the tulle. All right, so the same part where we have a difference in the regularity of the meter, we also have an irregularity in the rhyme scheme. Now, the irregularity in the rhyme scheme is a little longer. It's more than the irregularity in the meter. But still, it's the same kind of idea. That's the change. They're not just going out for a drive, they're going to death. So we both basically have the same idea there. Okay. So in the section on meter, you will tell me that the rhymes, or the, I'm sorry, on the section on rhyme scheme, you'll tell me that the rhyme begins quite regularly, but then it changes as it goes. It becomes irregular at about the same time that the meter becomes irregular. And then it goes regular again, because at the end, in the last stanza here, PBQB, it's regular again. Okay, so by the end of the poem, it gets regular. Now, if you were doing a poem by Emily Dickinson for your project, you would mention the idea that Emily Dickinson works with slant rhyme. She uses inexact rhyme. And you would give examples of day and eternity. Okay, you would give examples of away and civility. So if you were working with someone like Emily Dickinson, who was very known for her irregularity in rhyme, for her slant rhyme, you would mention this in the section on rhyme scheme and give examples from the poem of that. All right. Does everybody understand what we're doing up until now? Any questions?
About the examples, how can we like mention them in the project?
Just like that. For example, if you say Emily Dickinson was known for her slant rhyme or her irregular or inexact rhyme, which meant that the words didn't necessarily rhyme with each other. They kind of rhyme. You give a definition of what slant rhyme is. And
Okay.
you would say, in the poem, we can see several examples, such as you would use these two lines, such as, and I had put away for his civility.
So a short one.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, but it's always good to pull the examples from your poems and put them in the explanations that you're giving.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions right now? All right. I'm going to choose another color now. And now the next, I want you to start with meter and then go to rhyme scheme. After that, you can go in whatever order you want to. I'm going to go with personification because I think it's the biggest one that we have here next. So for example, I will choose blue for personification. And the first example of personification is going to be death. Yeah, death is a huge example. So I'm going to mark death in my poem. Okay, because here you see the he, right? So you're creating a persona for death. You're making death, giving him characteristics of a person. All right. Now there's another part too where we see Mhm. We passed the setting sun, or rather, he passed us. She doesn't say it passed us, she says he passed us. Here's another example of personification, the setting sun. Okay, because we have again the he. And I think that's it, right? Yeah. Uh-huh. So we have the two of them, the personification of death and of the sun. Now, in the section, my next title would be personification. And then I would give a quick definition. Personification is the author giving characteristics of a person to an inanimate object or an animal. In this poem, for example, we see death being personified. And then I might write the two lines, because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. We can also see the sun being personified in this poem. For example, we passed the setting sun, or rather, he passed us. And that's the end of personification. Okay? So I'm going to give a definition of personification, and then I'm going to give you the examples of personification that we see in the poem. Now, what does personification do in a poem? What does personification do in a poem? It gives human characteristics, we know. But what does that do? For example, what happens when you give death human characteristics? Death is a concept. All right? Death is not a person, death is a concept. No matter what our cultural ideas tell us about it, right? Death is a concept, not a person. So what happens when we give them characteristics of a human? We make them human. Okay? And in this case, death is a he. And as you said at the beginning, she makes death into this gentleman caller, into this courter, into this suitor, into this man who comes to pick her up, to take her out and start courting her and possibly marry her and live the rest of her life. So it really is a big impact to say, I'm going with death because I plan to spend the rest of my life with him. Oh, how ironic is that? I plan to spend the rest of my life with death. Okay. So the fact that death is a person that she is going to go with really makes the poem much stronger. The setting sun. What happens when she personifies the sun? She gives him this human characteristics, make it a he also. Okay. And almost sounds like the setting sun is the person who is signaling to them that they're going this other direction. Almost like the sun is going, hey, how's it going? Yep, right this way. Mm-hmm. All right, there we go. There. So we have those two reasons for personification. Include that in the section on personification. Why? Why? What happens when the poet uses personification in those instances? All right. Questions about that? Right. I'm going to go on to alliteration. Alliteration is a tool that I think is incredible. I think it does so much for a poem. So in the section on alliteration, I'm going to say alliteration is the repetition of sounds at the beginning of words that are near each other in the poem. Now remember, alliteration doesn't always have to be on the same line. Alliteration can be at the end of one line and at the beginning of the next, and they still come together quite nicely. All right, so let's see if we can find some alliteration here in the poem. I know we can, actually. He kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, He knew no haste, right here. He knew no haste. Remember, we're working with the sounds, not the letters themselves, because we may have two different letters that give the same sound, and that's what's happening here. So we actually have he knew no haste. The he, haste, and the knew no. And I had put away my labor and my leisure too. Right? My labor and my leisure too, for his civility. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun, or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill. The dews drew quivering and chill. Now, quivering and chill look similar, but they're not the same sound. For only gossamer, my gown, my tippet, only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then, to centuries, and yet feel shorter than the day. Here we have than, the, than the day. I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. Okay, we have quite a number of examples of alliteration. So in the section on alliteration, we're going to define, first of all, what alliteration is. What alliteration is. And then we're going to give some examples from the poem. Now, there's a number of examples here. Choose two, choose three, choose the best ones. I like the H sound here at the end. I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. The horses' heads. Horses' heads. I imagine the horses as they're walking along and the air is coming out. Right? The carriage is taking Emily and Death to the tune. So this is to me like a sound effect of the horses as they pant, as they walk and draw the carriage. You might feel it's something else, right? I would also choose the setting sun. I love the S sound alliterated because the sun, the heat of the sun, the setting sun. So even though the sun is going down, it's a little cooler, it's still like when it touches the ground, that sound of the sun. I really like the S sound there. Okay, so I would choose those two. You can choose another two that you have, but explain to me what that alliteration does, what it makes you think, what it sounds like, what kind of effect it gives to the poem, because that's what alliteration does. Okay. All right. We haven't seen enjambment. Now, enjambment is funny because I'm going to change colors here. Something like enjambment. Let's use a pink here. She uses, like we said, a lot of punctuation that is not conventional in poems. Okay. But this is to indicate really what a comma would have done fine here. But since she has punctuation here, we're not going to count it. But look, for example, at this line. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too, for his civility. So we have, he knew no haste, and I had put away. Remember, and is a conjunction that joins two parts together, two independent sentences together. and I had put away my labor and my leisure too. So we have this sentence going into this sentence, going into this. It's all one big sentence divided in different places. She divides it for the meter. She divides it for the meter. Remember, here we have iambic tetrameter, iambic trimeter, iambic tetrameter, iambic trimeter. The meter is very regular at this point. And so she divides it to keep that meter. She doesn't want one big long line and then one short line here, but she wants to keep it constant. So this is why she uses enjambment. Okay. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We have enjambment. This line goes down into this line. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We have punctuation here. We passed the setting sun, or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. So we have this all together as one sentence, but it's divided in the poem. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice and the ground. Since then, 'tis centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day. I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. Right? Those 4 lines in the poem are actually one continuous sentence. It's just divided for the poem. So you're going to have a section called enjambment. And enjambment, the first thing you're going to do is give a definition what enjambment is, and then give us some examples of enjambment from the poem and tell us why the poet used enjambment here. Maybe they used it for the meter. If the poem doesn't have a regular meter, maybe they used it for the impact that it would have. Maybe they used it as part of the sound effects they wanted to have. Maybe there's a different reason they used it. Okay, but tell us why they used it. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do the same thing for assonance, for consonants. What else are we going to do it for? You have other
Anaphor.
elements. Again?
Anaphor.
Anaphor, all right. If you have repetition, anaphor, symbolism, onomatopoeia. Okay, we don't have any examples of onomatopoeia here, so we're not going to include it.
Assonance.
Assonance, right? Consonants. So any of the other elements that your poem has, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to choose a color and pull them out. And then you're going to give a definition of what that element is and give examples from the poem and tell us why you think the poet used that device. Okay? And then there'll be a quick conclusion, but your conclusion will just be a summary of the work. We can look at that next class. And what I'm going to do today, after the video converts, I'll put the video up on YouTube. I'll send you a link on Facebook, okay, so that you can watch this again in case you have any questions. And I will copy this poem as we have it marked and put it up on Facebook also, so you can refer to it. Now,
Okay.
Does anybody have a poem that you would like to do, or would you like me to give you the name of a poem? Or would you like to, normally what I do is I have slips of paper with the names of poems and I have students choose them. and luck tells them what their poem's going to be. But you're so few and you're doing a great job. So what we can do is from today till Wednesday, look around at different poems and see if there's one that you would be interested in working with. Okay? Bring
Okay.
your ideas. Bring a couple of options, not just one. Bring a couple of options so that you can say, I like this one, and we'll take a look at it and see if that's a good one for what we're doing and say, okay, that's your poem. So that on Wednesday, you know exactly what your poem is that you'll be doing and you'll be able to start working with it. All right?
Okay.
All right. And we'll be doing the same
Okay.
thing with the next poem so that you're seeing different aspects and getting a better idea of how you're going to analyze the poem. Any questions right now?
No.
Questions right now?
Nope.
Okay, great. Great then. So I'll get this information up to you so that you have it and you start looking at different poems that you might be interested in working with. Just make sure they're not the ones that we're doing in class. And on Wednesday, we'll see them and talk about them, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Wonderful then. I'll see everyone on Wednesday. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Yeah,
teacher.
bye-bye.